Today's episode is brought to you by United Faith Leaders, the host of the Faith Leader Directory. The world is looking for your ministries. Be found. Learn more at unitedfaithleaders.com. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Coffeepot Fellowship Podcast. My name is Jay McNeil, and our guest today is Lisa Sharon Harper. Welcome, Lisa.
Hey, Jay, it's so great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk a little more than usual at the beginning here because you have this wonderful stockpile of stuff I want to tell people about you. So here I go. In 2015, the Huffington Post recognized her as one of 50 powerful women religious leaders to celebrate on International Women's Day. Most recently, Relevant magazine recognized The Very Good Gospel as one of 6 books that will change the way you see the world, and Ms. Harper as one of the 7 leaders to follow in 2017. She is in the ordination process with the Evangelical Covenant Church. From Ferguson to New York to Germany and South Africa, Ms. Harper leads trainings and helps mobilize clergy and community leaders around shared values for the common good. A prolific speaker, writer, and activist, Ms. Harper is the founder and president of Freedom Road US. That's freedomroad.us, a consulting group dedicated to shrinking the narrative gap in our nation by convening forums and experiences that bring common understanding, common commitment, and common action toward a just world. Something I'm getting to experience, right? That'll probably come up. Ms. Harper is the author of several books, and I'm going to take a deep breath here and read for you 4 titles because I believe they give a really good insight into her heart and spirit as our guest. Is everybody ready? Number 1, evangelical does not equal Republican or Democrat. Number 2, left, right, and Christ. Evangelical faith in politics. Number 3, forgive us. Confessions of a compromised faith. And 4, the critically acclaimed, the very good gospel. How everything wrong can be made right. I should also recognize that I am in the midst of getting to experience Lisa's leadership as she is facilitating a great conversational work in Richmond over the course of many months. I also want to acknowledge that I was a very grumpy Jay McNeil the 4 days I got to spend with Lisa earlier this month, as I was in full recovery from this year's dreaded flu, for which I remain apologetic, Lisa. So with all of that, welcome. And is there anything that I need to correct or add to your introduction there?
Well, only that I didn't experience you as grumpy. I thought you were fine.
Well, hopefully you'll see the difference today.
Okay.
I really was quiet. I tried to do a lot of listening, but we started on a Monday, and I probably really should have stayed home another day, but slowly over the week, I felt human on Thursday.
That's hilarious.
Right?
Well, glad you were with us.
Thank you. It really was a great week, and I appreciate the process and all the relationships that we have begun. And so you had been in Richmond a couple months before that, and I got to hear you then. You and I were actually in Charlottesville together, but we didn't know each other. And then I'm hoping to be part of a fall summit here in Richmond when we do our reconvening. So lots of crisscrossing going on. I'm really grateful that you're making your way into Richmond, which is obviously very convenient for me. And this morning we're talking to you, and you're all the way on the East Coast, right?
Actually, I'm all the way on the West Coast this morning.
I misspoke.
I'm in Los Angeles hanging out with my family and also doing some work from here as well.
Okay. Well, in our normal launching, we like to ask our guests this very presumptuous question. Lisa, how do you like your coffee?
Oh, how do I like my coffee? I love cappuccino, soy, with honey. And it should be a wet cappuccino, not one of those cappuccinos that's like 100% foam. I don't like that. So there you go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Then we'll jump into our story questions and ask you, do you have a favorite story, either one of your own or one that you've been told that you're willing to share?
The night before my 8th birthday, as I was at my next door neighbor's house watching Brian's song, when her mother just suddenly said, "I'm sorry, it's time to go to bed. You got to go home." So I never really got to see the end of the movie, which is really kind of sad. But I walked across the lawn with my sister to our house. We knocked on the door, expecting mom and dad to open the door, and the door was opened by a black glove. And I looked up, and I didn't know the guy who opened the door. So immediately we froze. I look across like just into the house, and I see my dad sitting on the couch with his hands tied behind his back. And then I look across the room when I walk in a little bit, and I see my mom tied with her hands behind her back. We were being robbed. And so now we're being robbed at gunpoint and knife point. This is Philadelphia. It's West Oak Lane, Philadelphia. And I run to my dad. I cry. Eventually, they used our family to get to the next door neighbors who were running numbers right next door. So running numbers means they were running the lottery before the lottery was legal. So that meant that night they had a ton of money. And those robbers knew that. They had been casing them. And they got us to basically get us to get the next door neighbors to let them in. So now we're all sitting there, and Miss Betty, the woman who lived right next door, Miss Betty gave me her purse to sit on so that I would hide her purse. So I was now the mule, I guess, or the person who was hiding the purse from the from the robbers. And these guys they were serious. And so then all of a sudden, as an 8-year-old, I don't know how I knew this, but I knew that if I said, I knew they weren't going to hurt me. I knew they might hurt my dad. Like if my dad tried to be a man, he could die that night. But I knew that I'm this little 8-year-old girl. So I just started talking to one of them, so where are you from? Literally. And then also, I literally asked him, I said, so you have a gun. Would you use it? You wouldn't use that, would you? And he said to me, "Oh, no, this is just for show." And then there's this other little guy who's like running up and down the stairs, getting stuff, taking it out the house. And every 15 minutes, there are new people coming to the door, all with money. Everybody who came got robbed. And eventually we ended up being put in the basement. We were all locked into a small closet together. There were literally about 15 people locked into a closet together. This closet, it turns out, has a collection of swords.
Oh.
This is so crazy. I had some crazy next door neighbors apparently. And so, it turned out that we were in that closet for a long time. And then we finally broke our way out when we realized the robbers weren't there anymore. And we checked our stuff. And my best friend, Tracy, her piggy bank was stolen. They stole her piggy bank. But the funny thing is the piggy bank was a fake one. So when you shook it, there was no real money in it. It was just the sound of money. And so anyway, and they also stole my dad's paycheck, which of course was a tragedy. So anyway, that's one of my favorite stories because I saw this incredibly horrible, an event that could have gone horribly, an event through 8-year-old eyes. And to this day, I see it through 8-year-old eyes because that's how I experienced it. And as I experienced it, it was fun because we got to go over to Tracy's house.
Yeah. That
Crazy.
is, the word audacious is coming to mind, for you as an 8-year-old, but
Yeah.
it was more bold. Audacious almost has, different connotations to
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
but a bold bravery, right? Because you're really protecting your family.
I guess so.
That's what it was about, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I knew that. There was something in me at 8 years old that knew that he might shoot my dad, but he's not going to shoot me. So I can engage him as a child, which was it's kind of amazing, actually. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you. All right. We're going to turn to a story of biggest trial or blunder. Do you have one of those that you would be willing to share, Lisa?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because I'm sure that I have more recent ones. In fact, I know I have more recent ones, but I honestly think I might have blocked it out because it was too traumatizing. I'll go back to a story that was actually very formative for me in terms of it really taught me a huge lesson in leadership. And it comes from my early years in leadership as a campus minister in a campus ministry. And we were at UCLA. And I was leading ministry in a dorm called Sunset, the Sunset Dorm, right, at UCLA. And that meant basically that I was responsible for the community life, the discipleship of the students that were involved in our community ministry in that dorm. And that dorm had the largest community of all of them. So this year that I was ministering there, um, there seemed to be some buzz happening, and I didn't really know about it. I thought things were going great. I was giving great reports about the work going on in Sunset. The leaders were fired up. The leaders were doing really well. I was training them in leadership, which was wonderful. We went on a leadership retreat together, just me and these 6 leaders, and it was awesome. But I completely was blindsided by the fact that there was one disgruntled student who was, really hurt by something that we did. And I think legitimately hurt by something that we did. It was like a blind spot for us. But that student started to talk, and then other students started to talk. And next thing you know, we have a wildfire. Like the ministry in Sunset is going down in flames. And the leaders are burned. Everybody was, and it all started with one spark. It started really when that student voiced their first note of concern to our leaders and wasn't taken seriously, and then to me, and I didn't take it that seriously. And next thing you know, they need an outlet, so they start talking amongst themselves, and she starts to spread. So the leadership lesson in that time, because I almost lost an entire ministry of this, or part of the ministry of this ministry overnight. The leadership lesson was, when you're in leadership, you do not let things get to the point of a bonfire. You address it when it's a spark, because bonfires are started by sparks, and forest fires are started by sparks. So you address the spark when it doesn't feel like it's that big, and then you won't have to deal with putting out a forest fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the student started out doing the right thing, right?
Actually, yeah.
Right.
They came, they voiced their concern to the leaders. They just didn't have a category for how to deal with it, because I had not trained them in that. And I also just didn't have a category for people thinking that what we were doing was wrong. I was young. I didn't realize, wow, I can actually do things wrong. And so, so that you learn and you start to have a little bit of humility, not a little bit, but a lot of humility,
right.
when you're looking at your ministry burning down. Right. So,
well, and even just, hearing you now, right, this is number of years later, right? And so the ability to say, I was wrong, I made a mistake. Just the ability to articulate that, I think for many professionals, however they're getting their paycheck, if they use those words, they feel like it's the end or the beginning of the end.
Which is really funny, because it's actually exactly the opposite. I think that what I found is that as a leader, the most important thing you have to do is you have to build and then maintain trust. And that was actually another big lesson of that time, is that I assumed trust where I had not built trust. And the lack of engagement with the disgruntled person is actually part of what destroyed trust, not just for them, but for everybody. And that's what that was the content of the bonfire. There was just a lack of trust in the whole ministry, because people didn't trust me as an agent of that ministry, because I didn't listen. And I wasn't willing to say I was wrong. And it wasn't like I was listening and then just wouldn't say I was wrong. It was more like I wasn't listening because I didn't have a category for being wrong, which is kind of ironic. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That is helpful. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back, okay?
Sure.
Did you know there is a website where you can find just childcare? You can narrow your search by babysitters, nannies, daycare centers, backup care, after-school care, and more. As a Christian minister, I thought, why don't we have a website? When people are looking for a minister, they don't know what church I'm at, what denomination I am, or what support or services I'm called and prepared to offer. I searched and searched for this place, but it didn't exist. Why are all Christian clergy standing together? Why isn't there visual representation on the internet? I can understand church moving slow to get this done, since we are always slow adopters of technology. But don't we understand yet that the internet is a true meeting space? Thinking more about the website I would create, I realized it would need to be inclusive. The more I have seen hatred and hurt enacted on my sisters and brothers beyond my Christian tradition, I've realized the importance of respect and relationship with diverse folks. As a faith leader, this is especially important with the leaders of other denominations and religions. What's more, the world is increasingly educated about their diverse faith choices. Everyone is creating, as Thomas More calls it, a religion of one's own. This has always been true, but it is only increasingly true as technology expands and our world shrinks. When the public goes to search for faith leaders, they're encouraged when they find us together, rather than in our isolated silos. Of course, searches can be narrowed in various ways, including faith tradition. Lastly, not every babysitter is a good fit for the public website. Likewise, faith leaders who feel compelled to proselytize are not a really great fit with United Faith Leaders. If you are a faith leader who is respectful, kind, and patient, then you are invited to publish your ministries in the Faith Leader Directory at unitedfaithleaders.com. And we are back with Lisa Sharon Harper. Thanks for being with us, Lisa.
Absolutely, Jay. Good to be here.
Thanks. How about if we now turn to a happiest ministry moment? Do you have one of those to share?
I do. I have to choose between a couple of them, but I'll say that probably the happiest ministry moment I've ever had was on the Friday that DACA was announced by President Obama that he was going to actually enact something called DACA. And the reason for that, the reason it's my happiest ministry moment, is because that earlier that week on Tuesday, I had been working with a group called the Evangelical Immigration Table. The Evangelical Immigration Table formed just like about a year before that, about a year and a half before DACA was announced. And it had formed with a bunch of evangelical organizations, top organizations like Sojourners and World Relief, the Southern Baptist Convention, the National Evangelical Latino Coalition, Esperanza USA, and others, right? So you had this broad swath of evangelical organizations that were coming together in order to help influence Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And so we had put together a strategy that was going to take 2 years. We were actually working on a 2-year strategy and had just launched. I mean, actually, in fact, Tuesday was the launch of that strategy, that Tuesday. And for that launch, we went to Congress. We went up literally into the congressional building and held a press conference to say we are standing together and we are calling for comprehensive immigration reform. And we even got a representative from Focus on the Family to come and be a part of that press conference and had signatories of 150 evangelical leaders and leading organizations that were calling for comprehensive immigration reform. So that was on Tuesday. On Friday, 3 days later, and early in the morning, I think it was 7 a.m., Jim Wallace got a call from the White House saying that because we had held that press conference, the president that morning was going to be announcing a new reprioritization of deportations, of enforcement of deportation policy, so that students, young people brought to the United States of no accord of their own by their parents would actually not then be at the top of the pile for enforcement, but rather be given the ability to work and dream. And through this new program, DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And so that whole day, all I could do was weep. I thought, oh my gosh, we had a 2-year plan. And here we were just told that 1.5 million young people could be affected by this change in prioritization. And that the reason why they were able to do that, in addition to all the push, all the organizing that dreamers themselves had been doing, the reality that evangelicals had stood up and said, we want comprehensive immigration reform, and that there was such a broad group, gave the president cover to be able to make that decision, to be able to put DACA into being. Mm-hmm. So I literally wept the entire day. I literally could not stop crying the entire day, knowing that the work that I had done and that this group had done, that I was a part of, was now impacting, or let's say blessing, actively blessing 1.5 million people. There was nothing like knowing that on that day.
It's always difficult for me when I think about the impact of federal decisions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I bet you'd have wept all day if you'd have seen one person get blessed that way, right? I mean, if 2 years of your work had allowed somebody a lifetime with the opportunities that most folks are afforded in this country, wow, right? And then you make that number 1.5 million, and it's just, you can't bring yourself back together, right?
No, it's totally true. And the thing is, we had relationship with an undocumented person who we were trying to hire, and we couldn't because we couldn't hire them because they were undocumented, and so it was very personal for me because I knew that she then would actually be benefiting from the work that we did. It was very personal. And at the same time, then I could magnify that 1.5 million times and know that many lives had just been made, really, had changed and made. And what's so ironic now is that now it is our current president that has decided arbitrarily to end DACA, and the date of that end will be March 5th. But according to the courts right now, they're actually questioning his ability to do it. So thank God there's still time for him to change his mind, especially knowing that the reason why DACA came to be in the first place, in part, was because evangelicals, the core of his base, stood up and said they wanted it.
Mm-hmm. Well, to say I hope for the best is too weak. There's a lot of action and prayer that needs to be involved. So
yeah.
Keeping all those pieces moving forward. I'm working very hard to get the pieces in place to be able to be as active as I want to be. Charlottesville was a place that I was able to show up, but there's so much involved in being able to be present and not having to be elsewhere in the world, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I think, can I just offer a piece of advice there? Because I think I was just talking with some folks yesterday about how do you choose? How do you actually do justice? I think that what you do, because not everybody can do everything, but there's a wonderful African proverb that says, how do you eat an elephant? You surround it on all sides and take a bite. So you surround the elephant on all sides and you just start to eat your section. And so that's the goal. So what we need to do is we need to actually choose, where is our passion? What exactly does make us weep? Is it the issue of immigration? Is it the issue of police brutality? Is it poverty? Is it women's empowerment? Is it the intersection of all of those things, right? So where has God laid your heart and made your passion? That's the place where you need to actually focus and then show up.
Right. Amen. It is hard to focus, but it's good to sort that out.
Yeah.
I'm actually trying to turn my attention for the next year. It is not the area of my greatest passion, but around the redistricting reform against gerrymandering, because it impacts every other issue.
Yes.
So for the next 10 months, we're making a huge push in Virginia to make a constitutional amendment that has various components to try and fix that. But Yeah, I was at after the March conference a couple days ago here in Richmond, talking about all these different issues and trying to figure out how to move forward on things. And we're currently, our General Assembly is in session, so there's a lot of legislation being considered and a lot more not being considered that should be considered. So anyhow, we're trying to make the elections a little more fair.
Yeah.
All right. As we turn to wrapping up, is there anything explicitly that you would like to promote before we go? It could be the very good gospel if you'd like, or anything.
Well, hey, yes, the very good gospel is actually, if you want to go deeper in your understanding of what does the kingdom of God smell like? What does it look like? What does it require of its citizens? And really what that we're talking about is the biblical concept of shalom. Then definitely pick up the very good gospel, lead a small group within your church or within your ministry or organization around the book. It's not just about systemic justice, although it absolutely goes there and actually goes even to international justice, but it's also about justice between ourselves and within our relationships. So dealing with issues of shame, dealing with brokenness in families, dealing with brokenness between genders, and also with the environment. So pick up the very good gospel today. How's that for an advertisement?
Perfect. And I'm glad to do it. And that's why I brought it up. I didn't want it to not get mentioned at this point. I also have embedded a video, I think it's like a 3-minute video that you did talking about the book. And so that video is
very good.
with everything else that we've talked about, is at the show notes page at coffeepotfellowship.com. So if you want to catch that video or any of the links or any of the information that we've talked about, you can get that at coffeepotfellowship.com. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time from the West Coast, not the East Coast, this very early morning for you to be with us.
Absolutely. It was really a pleasure. And thanks for asking those great story questions. Thank you.
We love story here. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for living into who you are fully called to be. So I have turned the microphone back on to add another promotional thing that came up, as we had already mentioned DACA, but Lisa had some really specific, helpful suggestions that ways that we could all participate and help support those DACA folks. I'm reluctant to use the language of dreamers, right? Because I know there's been a little pushback on that, but those are the folks that we're talking about, the DACA recipients who have been referred to as dreamers. So what was your suggestions, Lisa, for folks, if we can get this out before or even after, if it comes out after March 5th, but regarding DACA?
Well, the DACA, the deadline is March 5th. March 5th is that arbitrary date that our president set to rescind it, to kill it, basically, as a policy. And so churches can get involved by doing one of three things. One, you can pray. And I mean seriously pray. I don't mean that as like a throwaway thing. I mean actually, if you actually believe in a God that can actually move things in the heavenly realm, then we need you to pray, literally pray for God to move things in the heavenly realm, to make it possible for Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform now, because that is the only thing that is actually standing between mass deportations and actually a solution. So pray. Second, you can call your congressman and call on your congressman and woman to support comprehensive immigration reform. So make sure that, because they are having those conversations over this whole next month, but especially in this week, there is a window this week between now and March 5th for them to actually bring comprehensive immigration reform to the floor and to vote on it and to pass it. So call their office. Don't write, don't text, don't tweet. Call their office and call on them to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And the last piece is, if March 5th passes and DACA ends, and thank God there's actually some possibility of the courts holding that up. In fact, this morning there was good news that came that the courts really might be holding that up. We're not sure. But if DACA is rescinded, then I believe that every church needs to follow the example of the biblical sanctuary city model and become a sanctuary church in the United States. This is where the separation of church and state comes in. And in our nation, thank God for it, actually, in the Constitution, because it gives us the ability to exercise our faith, even in light of a government that would go completely against our faith. And that means that we have the ability to hold immigrant families, young people in sanctuary within our churches, or at the very least, to become, we can actually become stewards on a new underground railroad for young people who literally will, after March 5th or after DACA is rescinded, will not be able to work. They will not be able to go to school. They will not be able to go to the hospital. They will not be able to get health care, particularly from Obamacare or any kind of government health care. They will literally not have a way to live within our borders in a legal way. So they will need the help of the church to do that. So we need to engage. There's a really great program that you can sign up to become a part of called the Matthew 25 Pledge. So you can go to Matthew25pledge.com. Matthew, and it's the numbers 25pledge.com. And there you'll find more information about what your church can do to engage this issue.
Awesome. Thank you. Definitely get involved in the sanctuary movement. We don't have a solution by March 5th, but before March 5th, press to have a solution. Contact your congressperson. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Jay.